welcome to Everyday Simple Somatics, a podcast dedicated to helping you find healing through your body's natural wisdom. My name's Dr. Christine Baker, and I'll be your host. I wonder if you ever find yourself going from really calm to really angry in like a matter of seconds, or maybe you're snapping at loved ones over small triggers. So today's podcast is going to be perfect for you. We are going to talk all about why these really fast escalations to anger and fight energy happen, what we can do to honor the wisdom of the fight response that's coming up inside of us, while at the same time staying regulated. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dr. Christine Baker. I am a trauma therapist and have been for the last 13 years. I also am a somatic experiencing practitioner, which just means that I'm a person that believes strongly that trauma is not just an event that happens to us, but it also leaves an imprint on our body, specifically our nervous system. And so healing from trauma has to involve our body and nervous system, which was actually the catalyst for this podcast. I wanted to create bite-sized interventions to help people begin the process of bringing their body along in their trauma recovery. And so that's what we do here. So every single week, I release a new podcast with a specific somatic intervention designed to support a specific mental health symptom or relational struggle. If you are new to nervous system work or somatic work, I'd love to invite you to check out the first 10 episodes of this podcast. I call them the essential foundations. It kind of reviews the basics of the nervous system, all the vocab you need to know before you jump into these weekly, more practical episodes. If this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, I'd love to invite you to like or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are currently watching or listening. All those little clicks really do help other people find these resources as well. So here's where I want to start. Fight energy is not bad. Fight energy is so good, and it's so important for your survival, for your mental health. We do not want to get rid of fight energy. I know so often if you are a person that deals with kind of a quick escalation of fight energy, you probably can look back on different examples in your life and see where that's caused you issues relationally or professionally. And so you may look at it and say, oh, my anger problem. I wish I didn't have this, right? Well, I just want to offer you that it's not the fight energy that's the problem. It's the way that we are engaging with it. And so instead of listening to that fight energy in our body, maybe in the beginning stages, we're letting it escalate all the way down to the end of the continuum when it results in a big blow up. Because here's the deal. Fight energy is really just what helps us recognize when a boundary is being violated or a boundary is needing to be put in place, and it gives us the energy to maintain those boundaries. That's vital for our human flourishing, right? The real challenge comes when our nervous system gets kind of stuck in this high alert place, probably because of chronic stress or a history of trauma. And so we're responding to these present day scenarios with the intensity of maybe past boundary violation or past fight energy levels. So my goal is to teach you today that what we need to do with this fight energy is allow it to actually move through our system. When we suppress it and, push it down and say, oh, don't be angry, don't blow up or whatever, it's just going to build up and then it will explode. And often we're going to kind of regret how that played out, right? The key here is learning to track that fight energy early, understand what it's trying to tell us, and then channel that fight energy in an effective way. And so that's what we're going to do today with our somatic practice. We are going to talk about early tracking of this activation. We're going to talk about how to slow things down so that we can actually listen to the boundary message that is inside. And then we're going to talk about how to safely discharge any kind of leftover energy in our nervous system once we've kind of determined, okay, here's the boundary that needs to be set. So Like always, I'm going to tell you what our somatic practice is going to be before we actually do it together, just so that you can decide if it's something that you'd like to try or not. So the first thing that we're going to do in our somatic practice is just a little bit of somatic inquiry or body curiosity. Okay. So I want you to think about the last time something made you angry. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic. Let's not go like to a 10 on the scale, right? Like let's go somewhere in the 3 or 4 range. So maybe someone cut you off in traffic. Maybe you had a rude waiter at a restaurant, like whatever it was. I want you to think about that moment and notice what happens in your body as you think about it now. What are some of the first things that happen in your body when you think about it now? You know, you may, whenever someone asks you, if you are a person that tends to go from 0 to 100, whenever someone asks you like, oh yeah, well, what's happening in your body when you're angry, you're probably thinking of the 100, right? Like you're like, well, I look like that little guy on Inside Out with fire coming out of his head. Yeah, that's probably the sensations related to 100. But what are the sensations related to 10? You know, here's some examples of things you might notice. You might notice jaw tension. Quite often, there could be some words that need to come out of your mouth. And if we're not allowing those boundaries to be spoken, then sometimes this area will kind of lock up. And so it's like our body trying to keep those maybe words of boundary inside. So that could be like a first signal. You could notice some heat happening. For me, often that kind of like starts in my core area, like my gut, my chest, and then it kind of flushes up into my face. I have always been someone who gets kind of rosy cheeked, you know, whenever I'm embarrassed or angry or even very sad. And so that's definitely something that happens. Like there's kind of a heat rush that can happen for me. You may notice like some muscle tension in other places as well, particularly arms and fists. That's very often some fight energy happening or building. One of the first cues for me for some fight energy building is actually in my eyes. So if I'm kind of feeling a certain way, you know, someone's making me feel a certain way, I notice that my eyes get like a kind of a squint, and then often I'm looking at them from the side. And so, you know, that saying of side eye, like that's very real for me. So that's something too, like that you may notice some tension or some movement of the eyes in a certain way. So take a second and really begin to notice like what are those signs for you? And then what we're going to do is as we notice those things, the second part of this somatic practice is going to be the slow down part, okay? And the most effective way for me to slow some kind of nervous system response down is for me to physically take a step back, okay? So I'm going to show you, like literally, take a step back. And so I'm not going to stay back there because you won't be able to hear me on my microphone. But yeah, so like you feel those sensations. And then for me, I would physically take a step back. If you're in a place, maybe you're in a professional meeting where you wouldn't be able to do that, you could even mentally imagine yourself taking that step back. But why that really helps me is it gives me this imagery of, let me get a bigger picture here. You know, like I'm kind of pulling back from the intensity of the situation so that I can orient to the whole situation, including my own nervous system response, you know? And so it's almost like I'm taking a step back so that I can observe myself as well. So that's the second part. So notice those sensations, number one. Number two, take that step back to kind of get curious. And as you're back there, I'd love to invite you to place a hand on your heart, hand on your stomach. This is kind of like core right here. There's a lot of wisdom right here in the core. And just say to yourself, what boundary needs attention here? What boundary do I need to firm up, to set, to reinforce? So there's just a moment of, I'm going to step back from the intensity and I'm going to get curious about why this fight energy is coming up. What is the boundary that is being threatened so that I can address that? That's what needs to happen. That's what my body's trying to tell me right now, you know? So let's listen to it. And so that's step number two, right? Like take that step back, maybe hand somewhere on the core, heart, gut, whatever feels right to you. and then what boundary needs to be addressed. And so then you can address the boundary. So maybe you need to say to that person, I can't continue this conversation right now. I'd love to come back to it later on today, or you're not allowed to speak to me that way, or whatever the boundary is, you can actually address the boundary. Then if you notice that there's still kind of some intensity inside, so that may feel like your heart's still racing, there's still a lot of heat in your body, there's like a racing kind of adrenaline feeling in your arms, whatever it is, if you're like, woo, I'm still activated from getting angry and needing to set that boundary, then this is where step 3 comes in, where we can actually discharge some of that leftover energy in your nervous system, okay? And so there's 2 kind of like primary ways that I'll do this. One is to do a wall push-up. And so for those of you that aren't familiar, I'm going to pretend that the end of my screen here is a wall, okay? So you would place your hands, see if I can do it. All right, here. Yep. You're going to place your hands on the wall, okay? And then you're going to put your legs in a lunge position. And the first step is you're just going to notice where that activation is in your body. Where is the leftover fight activation, okay? And so maybe it's in your arms. So you just notice it there in your arms, right? And then you're going to imagine, not do any movement yet. You're going to imagine that all of that fight energy that's left over in your arms is going to go out through your hands into the wall, that you're going to push all of that energy out into the wall, okay? And so you're just going to notice what happens in your body as you imagine that you're pushing all of that energy into the wall, okay? And then the third step there is you actually push into the wall. Imagine all of that energy going out. And then whenever it feels like it's done, you just drop your arms from the wall. Okay, so that would be a wall push-up. There is a very similar one with the same kind of 3-step process of notice where the activation is, imagine it leaving, and then actually doing the intervention. And that is with twisting. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I use, and then I'll also give you something that you can use. So I think that this is like a PT or maybe OT, I'm not sure, tool. It's called the TheraBand Flex Bar. Okay, and they have different levels of intensity, like how stiff I guess they are. And so what I'll do with this is same thing. Notice where the activation is. Imagine myself twisting it into the bar. And then whenever I'm ready, I actually twist all of that energy into this TheraBand and then drop the TheraBand whenever I'm done. Okay. So if you want to order one of these on Amazon, you totally can. Or you can just get a towel, twist it up and do the same thing, or like a blanket or something like this. So those are 2 practical ways that you can actually discharge any leftover fight energy that may be there after you have set your boundary. And the key here is you want to allow the level of intensity that still feels like it's inside to come out with the level of intensity of your muscle movement, if that makes sense. So it's like if there's a lot of intensity still in your arms, then you're pressing into the wall for maybe even like a full 30 seconds just to make sure that you're getting all of that out, and then dropping your arms, letting them fall. And when you let them fall, check in with yourself afterwards. Did I get all of that out? So anyway, okay, I'm noticing that I have talked for a very long time. And so we are actually not going to do the guided practice today because I feel like I've explained it like in a ton of detail. And I totally think that you guys can do this. So just as a reminder, first part is checking in, seeing what you're noticing. Any kind of sensations, those first little warning signs of I'm a tiny bit angry or I'm a little bit irritated, right? And then the next step is that step back to slow things down. Next step is hand on the heart, hand on the stomach. What boundary needs to be reinforced or set right now? And then the final part being discharging any of that leftover fight energy. And here's the thing, guys. Remember, your fight response has wisdom in it. It is telling you that something needs your attention, and our goal is not to eliminate that or suppress that. We just have to learn how to work with it. And so I really believe that this kind of 3-step somatic practice can help you do that. So that is all I have for today. I'd love to tell you a little bit about next week's episode. We are going to be talking all about releasing shame. And so that could actually be kind of tied into this week's episode of if I had a big fight response, now I feel shame about it afterwards. Yeah, next week's episode will be perfect to give you a really practical way to navigate shame responses you may be having. So if today's episode has been helpful or next week's sounds interesting to you, I'd love to just invite you again to like or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are watching or listening. I'd also love to invite you to consider joining us in the Somatic Wellness Collective. This is a monthly learning subscription where we have live classes, on-demand classes, journaling, all of these incredible resources to help support you in supporting and nurturing your nervous system. And so in closing, remember, your body has innate wisdom. We just have to learn how to listen to it, and that's what I'm here for. I'll see you next time.